Hi, I'm Richard Carter. I'm here with Victoria Hatcher, and welcome to This is Surgery, where we go behind the scenes of healthcare and talk to the people building what surgery looks like next. Today's guest is Fiona Wheeler, Deputy Chief Executive and COO at Barking, Havering and Redbridge University Hospitals, and someone who has spent more than 30 years doing one of the most demanding jobs in the NHS, which is making healthcare systems actually work. Fiona has just come out of the other side of one of the most significant digital transformations that the Trust has ever undertaken. But the conversation today isn't really about technology. It's about what it takes to embed it and what it takes to make it stick, and what separates the digital investments that deliver from the ones that don't. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the table, Fiona. It's great to have you here. Obviously, your career now spans, can we say 30 years?
We can say 30 years, at least.
Things Croydon and now at BHRUT. When people ask you what you do, what do you say? What's your role?
Well, my role at the moment is Deputy Chief Executive and Chief Operating Officer at BHRUT. I've spent the last 30 years working in operational roles. I started my career in contracting, actually. So at the beginning of my career at King's, I worked in the marketing department and contracting, and moved into operational management. So, yeah, I've worked probably in almost every hospital in London throughout my career. I have set up my own company in 2008 to provide healthcare consultancy. Did that for about 10 years. And then the call came back to go back into operational management. And I've been at BHRUT now for just over 4 years. I joined there just after the pandemic, was kind of brought in to help with the operational recovery. So pandemic kind of paralysed a lot of operational services. And the two things that needed to recover, one was the performance, the access for patients, and the other was, to re-establish ways of doing things, to get services running properly. And I think everybody knows that what came out of the pandemic was much lower levels of productivity, different ways of working, higher levels of infection control and assessment. And so, it was a bit of a slow start, but I went to BHRUT to kind of go, right, what do we need to do? Let's get going. And as an organisation, it had already pioneered some kind of really interesting developments around surgical delivery, elective surgical hub. And that was kind of the beginning of a whole new way of working for surgery in the NHS. And so really good stuff, very interesting. So went in there to do some performance improvement, ended up being Chief Operating Officer and Deputy Chief Executive.
Wow.
What's drawn you to operations? Like, it's especially in the NHS, it's a task.
It is.
It's one of the coup makes or breaks a place. Like, it really, really can. So, like, what's drawn you to ops?
I think certainly ops in the acute sector it's not everybody's favourite thing to do. It's hard work. It's like organising this enormous mass of people and services, and I say this to everybody, a lot of it's common sense, but common sense in the broadest possible way. You can't be single vision, single task. You shoulder everything from, people, finance, access, delivery and data on a day-to-day basis. I suppose most chief operating officers provide that glue within the executive. You know a bit about everything, you know how to interpret service problems in many different ways, and you can look at things through the lens of money, through the lens of productivity or data, through the lens of people, people's careers, the ways of structuring the delivery of services. And the kind of final thing I did a lot of when I was at the Royal Marsden was, building buildings and buying equipment to improve services. And that, that is what we do, and we do it well. But as a coup, you have to be pretty much on it all the time. It's not for everyone, that kind of career. I think I always say this, I'm probably the oldest coup. Somebody who's still working in the acute sector, really at the operational side.
Because it's
32
relentless.
years. It never stops.
It's relentless, yeah.
And every day will bring a different challenge. So, we've got all the business as usual stuff like budget setting and performance assessment and all of the returns we do. But alongside that, we've got, emergency planning, things that happen in the world, and in, things like, at the moment we're dealing with the lack of helium. And does that affect the way we provide MRI services? Are there any risks? And so you've got loads of stuff going on internally with people and delivery. You've got loads of stuff going on in the outside with the NHS generally, things you need to respond to. And then you've got, the external factors, what's going on in the world. Does it impact on supply chain? Do we stop doing things? And I mean, one of the recent examples I'd give you, really simple one, was that the company that make the cement for orthopedics, I can't remember, there's no, they couldn't export. And actually, that just sounds like a news item, but that's a big deal. We didn't know. Well, we had to find out how much cement we had in the stocks, how long that would allow us to keep operating for. So what do? Can we find an alternative supplier? Can we switch products not using cement? Or do we have to cancel patients? So you've got that whole breadth of assessment that needs to be done really quickly, really effectively and really accurately to make sure you can keep going. And then the kind of flip side of that is, okay, so if we have to cancel lots of patients, what does that mean for performance? We're running the, waiting list reduction, long waiters reduction. So there's like, 5 or 6 major issues resulting from one company somewhere in the world running out of cement or not being able to export it. So that's kind of what we do as Coos. We pick up all of that stuff. Yeah.
And it's not just
running and terrifying. Sorry, just listening to some of that.
I know.
Wow.
Glad I just do software. But it's not just the day to day and those sort of very intense moments. I think BHR UT has gone live with Oracle Health's Cerner platform. I think, was it November 2025? So you've got these really big strategic deliveries alongside. Can you give us a sense of how that weaves into your day and what that process was like?
I mean, we kind of, our slogan was, we're the last acute hospital not to have an EPR. So start with the problem statement. We operated quite successfully with a kind of hodgepodge of software solutions for different bits of the organisation. And to a certain extent, humans will organise themselves around what's available. Okay, you know this. So even though the systems were, it's like Heath Robinson interconnections, and there were a few faults and problems and deficits within that. We ran pretty well. Our data was pretty good, reasonably resilient in terms of consistency of reporting and validation. And obviously, the move towards having an electronic patient record, a recognised electronic patient record, the single provider, was always going to be the goal, aligning us with other acute hospitals, getting us into that arena. And, the NHS uses the word analogue to digital. And so that is our direction of travel. So it took us about 2 years to get through the business case situation, get the funding, create the project team that were doing all the planning. And we're also using the BARTS instance.
Yes, of course.
So we weren't designing from the beginning. We were taking a product that kind of already exists in the acute sector. But then there are challenges with that because we're overlaying the way one hospital works into a hospital that doesn't necessarily work like that.
For themselves.
Exactly. So first of all, most importantly, to be good partners. So we're coming to you, So yes, how do we work as a partnership? 2, making sure the organisation could carry on being a hospital. Let's not. We're not just an EPR. We are a hospital. I mean, our A&E department sees 1,000 patients a day. So keeping all the wheels on the track, all the lights on, keeping everything going, huge amount of assessment and due diligence required to do that kind of work. It's tough. It makes everybody's day job twice as hard as it was because you're focusing on keeping things going and adopting a new way of working and a new system that people aren't necessarily familiar with. So huge amounts of learning, huge amounts of training, huge amounts of scenario planning. So, yeah, I mean, we delayed the go live twice, mainly because, that kind of 80-20 was not, are we 80% ready, 20% will sort itself out. I think we felt nervous about certainly some of the training, some of the readiness in some of the departments. So we did delay twice, but there comes a point with that kind of adoption where you have to say, we're as ready as we're going to be. We're going to have to work really hard to keep things going, but we're confident that things will be okay. So yeah, we went live in November. It was quite a unique event. I mean, literally everybody who was anyone in the hospital came in for the whole weekend. We were there in the morning, in the evening. We had a kind of, what do you call it, like a war room where everybody took problems to. We were really lucky to have the Bart's senior leadership giving us, holding our hand through the whole thing. Of course, things came up, unintended consequences, things came up all the way, things you never expected to happen. But we were there, present and able to mitigate, overrule, get involved in, do things on quite a rapid basis to make things safe. We had a couple of areas where we had to revert to paper, as our business continuity plan. It seems really odd, digital to analog, back to paper. Those are kind of things that you don't expect, but, we're a human service, so we can work with paper. Doesn't give you all the access to the history, but you can definitely see you, treat you, investigate you with paper on the day and keep that safe. So lots of challenges around that. And I think what's interesting for me is there's no blueprint for adopting technology. Lots of organisations have done it before, but there's no lift and shift manual that says, right, these are all things. I mean, there sort of is a framework, but there's no, this is what the COO will need to know about, this is what the CMO. And so, yeah, it was really testing. And I think in retrospect, I would say you couldn't possibly have enough people to help you do that. You just couldn't. We had a lot, but it wasn't enough. Or it didn't feel like enough. We had, post-implementation, we had some quite severe problems around the design of outpatients. Now, unintended consequence of adopting another outpatient way of working and overlaying it in another organisation. Now that can be fixed, we can rebuild it. We've got our friends in Oracle to help and all sorts of other people. But what did that do for the organisation? Slowed down performance, slowed down activity, really distracted people from...
Does it also make people lose confidence in the technology?
Well, I think people can't see the end of it. So you can't say to someone, right, that clinic's not built properly, but I'll show it to you tomorrow, and it is. It'll be 2 weeks, 3 weeks away. So,
and this was meant to make my job easier.
This was meant to make my job easier.
Yeah.
You've also got to remember that within an NHS organisation, we employ nearly 9,500 people. People come to the table very different scenarios. So somebody who's never worked anywhere other than BHRUT all their career, on the one hand, as an organisation, we celebrate that. Look at the loyalty, look at the commitment, how amazing it is that we've managed to develop this person's career. Have they ever worked in a hospital that's got an EPR? No. How old are they? Have they adopted technology in their life at whatever age group they are? So you've got that group of people. Then you've got loads of junior doctors who, on the North London rotation, they've worked at Bart, so they're, I know how to use this. And then you've got people in the middle who may have used something once, but not since they've been with us. And so applying the kind of, this is how you do things, there's got to be, you've got to think about it. You've got to compartmentalise it into who are we teaching and what we're teaching them to do. Basically stop an organisation from working the way it works today and implement a different way of working for everybody tomorrow is, I would imagine if you were in banking, you might have a completely different approach to that. You might not say, don't worry, we'll just stay open tomorrow and do everything will be the same. Guys, don't worry. I don't think you would do that. As the NHS, we're committed to improving and developing and implementing technology. Are we fully ready? Do we have the skills to manage change of that magnitude? I think it's a big learning curve.
I mean, that was in November, and we're now just about to come into May. So hopefully the dust has settled a little bit from that initial kind of implementation. When you look at your own role, can you give us a sense as how that implementation of a large EPR has kind of changed your life or changed the life of staff in the hospital?
Now, I'd say it's not a negative comment, but it caused mostly operational people a lot of stress because everything they could rely on before, the quality of data, the performance, the activity numbers, all of those things that measure your output kind of fell off a little bit. That doesn't mean we weren't doing the activity, but the data wasn't quite as validated as it normally came. We also implemented a brand new PACS system and a RIS system
At the same time?
and order comms at the same time. So we didn't just do EPR. We did all of this. So imagine changing the way radiology works, changing the way images are transferred, changing where they're stored, and doing an EPR at the same time. So, what do you need in ED? You need a CT scan. How do you do that with a new RIS and a new PACS and all that? And all that had to be worked through. So what I would say is that people showed a most amazing amount of personal and professional commitment to keeping the lights on. That was brilliant. So I suppose people get a bit tired and they're like, we just need stuff to be fixed. It's not as good as it was before. It used to be easier to do that. And so what you've got to do in my job was to keep people motivated, keep people, on that sort of single mission. Why can't we just go back to the RIS we had? It was better. It felt easier. It worked. So all of that stuff, yes, the dust has settled. Do we still have legacy BI data quality issues? Yes, we do. Have we created a kind of human industry of making the data right in lieu of it not quite being there yet? Yes, we have. So yet again, another example of how human beings step in when technology doesn't quite deliver. So, and also the one other thing that was been quite impactful is that we went into EPR with a really strong performance measurement in all of the domains of delivery, UEC, elective, recovery, RTT, DMO1 diagnostics. We were really up there with one of the highest performing trusts in London. And that kind of move with the data quality issues particularly kind of tanked it. And that's the only word I can use. So, and I said to the board, this is the most upsetting thing I'm ever going to show you. Because 4 years of work, which looked beautiful, became another recovery programme. Now, that doesn't mean that the services weren't delivering. It means our ability to demonstrate that through data, through good data and consistent data, resilient data, was difficult. So my job was very much to make sure reputationally that we showed that we were getting back on the horse, that we were going to deliver again, that we hadn't kind of turned the organisation inside out for no good reason. So, yeah, it's been really tough. And I would say to anybody adopting any technology, do your due diligence well. Make sure you've kind of really looked at what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what the benefits are going to be, because it's important to keep everybody on the right page. And when it feels really hard to deliver clinical care, you lose people quite rapidly. So, but yeah, I mean, I can't imagine anybody would want to do that more than once in their career.
I can't imagine anyone would do that even once in their career.
I have a feeling that you might, but so at BHRUT, it feels like you've done an amazing job in terms of, I know we've talked about some of the issues you've had over the EPR delivery, but, you're moving along really fast with elective recovery, more operations year on year in King George's, it's incredible, waiting list down, and you've delivered an EPR amongst all of that. When you look at that track record, how much of this do you think is sort of the true operational grit, and where has technology played a role in enabling any of that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think as well, on top of operational grit, you've got to have a team of people that want to innovate. So it starts with, what do most people come to work to do? So clinical and ops people come to work in a hospital to make sure patients are treated well, and that we deliver high levels of quality and performance, right? So that's the motivator. Does technology enable that? Only if you demonstrate that it does. Okay, because as I said earlier, you revert back to paper. I can still treat you. I can still make sure that, if you're unwell, I can look after you. So I think one of the amazing things about BHRUT is the clinical commitment to innovation. Our elective hub is one of many now, but was a real forerunner in changing the way elective or planned surgery is provided. So before the pandemic, a regular occurrence would be to cancel loads and loads of planned elective cases in the morning because A&E was full. Standard practice in the NHS. And, was born out of a kind of, we need to keep the organisation safe. The A&E patients are sicker than the patients coming in for a hip replacement. But actually, those two groups of patients are not that easily interchangeable. They're not one is higher than the other. If you think about what planned surgery is, it's an intervention in someone's health that you've planned to do because they need it. It's not because they don't need it. It's not.
Their quality of life is not degrading every day.
You're not less entitled to care because you're planned. So I think we went into the pandemic with this model where, urgent care, UEC kind of trumped planned, unless it was, cancer or something, in a kind of more of a kind of urgent environment. The pandemic kind of taught us, we all stopped doing planned care in the pandemic. That was the first thing we did, stop doing anything planned, mainly because of infection control issues, mainly because of risk, and mainly because of risk to staff as well as patients. What we learned, though, was that creating that clean list pathway allowed you to do less risky surgery in a single stream environment. So not with other patients, not near or potentially be contaminated by other. There were a lot of viruses about. We were concerned about that and didn't expose staff to unnecessary risk on their working lives. We learned a lot about infection control during the pandemic. Everybody did. So we did this at Croydon. We created a corridor that allowed us to use 4 theatres. I think it started with 2 just for planned care. And once we ticked all the boxes on that being a fast lane for planned care, it wasn't with urgent care, it wasn't near ED. We proved the concept that having an elective hub that's dedicated and only does one thing is a better way of providing surgical care. So Stella Vig and I worked on that in the pandemic. I think we put corridor up overnight. I think she and I nearly did it ourselves, to be fair. But this sort of like corridor, a hospital in a hospital almost. I think that's what we were calling it. And when I got to BHRUT, they'd already done that as well. And luckily at BHRUT, they had the benefit of having 2 acute sites. So instead of creating a hospital in a hospital, they basically said King George's will do planned care and Queen's will do emergency. And there is still some planned care at Queen's, but predominantly the high volume elective hub is at King George's. We were lucky enough to be awarded the additional funding to build 2 new theatres under the TIF scheme. And so we built another 2 theatres at King George's to create a 9-theatre elective environment that only does one thing, does what it says on the tin, planned care, and never ever gets derailed from doing that. And that is brilliant. It's brilliant for staff. It's great for patients. Our cancellation rate's almost non-existent. It's, the usual thing, someone's not well or unforeseen circumstances, but nothing gets cancelled because of what's going on in A&E. And also makes the teams work really well together because they've got single focus. High volume, low complexity is fantastic for patient access. And it becomes, a little bit competitive. We can do 13 cases on a list, not 8. And also clinicians and teams are very patient focused. So treating 13 patients on, say, I'm just making this up, but 13 rather than 8 is a number, and we've won the race. But actually that's 5 more patients than would have been treated before. And so not only is it good for staff, gives them a sense of purpose and motivation, allows you to innovate as a team, a multidisciplinary team, which is really important. Everyone's got a role. It's not just about surgeons or anaesthetists, but also patients, they get in, they know what time they're going into theatre, they come out and they're home or they're overnight. But, patients who are clear about what they're coming in for, what time it's going to happen and when they're going home. Much better patient experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So ticks all the boxes.
And it sounds so obvious when you lay it out like that. Well, of course, if you have one set of people doing the same, it makes perfect.
The other thing to remember is there's nothing, if you've ever been a patient, but there's nothing more distressing than going into a hospital for operation and being told halfway through the day that you're going to be cancelled on that day. The sheer, winding yourself up to come to hospital, your family, taking time off work, all of the things, and then being told, sorry, somebody in ED's taken your space. Nothing wrong with that because it's urgent. Think about the wider implications. And so, as an NHS, we're committed to trying to make people better, keeping them well. We talk a lot about inequalities. We talk a lot about wellness, having rapid access to appropriate planned surgery is part of that commitment that we've got. And if you get really into what elective hubs do, that's exactly what they do. Yeah.
Of course, improving access to surgery is core to Proximie's mission as well. Definitely what we're very focused on. And one of the features of Proximie is that it's a very real-time platform. So the Intelligence Suite provides real-time, objective, trustworthy data as to how things are progressing against plan. How do you feel that's going to change the way that people think and work in the OR, and also think and work around that kind of data as well?
Well, there's nothing new about wanting to use expensive theatre time well. So we've been hodgepodging data together for years to try and prove, okay, we've got national standards, 85% theatre utilisation, and we've also got a commitment to use our theatres, just use a theatre. If it's funded to run, we should be operating on patients. So I think the next step in that commitment, I think we talked about it the other day, £3,500 for a 4-hour session in theatre, not including the medical staff. So this is an expensive commitment that organisations make, and who wouldn't want to use that time most effectively to treat patients? I think technologically moving on from knife to skin, out of theatre time, is it in the anaesthetic room, what time do they go to recovery, that kind of data, those data points, they're all valid, but I think we've always known that there's an element of manual kind of override in some of that. Most upset surgeons and teams when you tell them their utilisation 65%, because people feel very, hurt by it. It's almost like a statement about their ability to deliver. So technology will take the human bit out of that. I think that's great. Automation is even better because it's not a human decision. It tells you what's going on in theatres. I think celebrating that as an innovation step forward is most important, rather than an oversight. Performance data has always been frightening to people, because if it's weaponized and used in the wrong context, it's not useful. If it's used as a marker and a point for celebration or an opportunity to change and improve, it has a much lighter feel to it. Teams are much more likely to engage with it and use data. So if you say, look, we did 13 cases instead of 8, that's a celebration point that data presents. If you use data to say that someone's not working hard enough, they'll take that in a very different way. So personally, I always talk to people about what data gives us the opportunity to improve, and whether, if it's automated or more or in real time, even better. even better. Take away some of the human decision-making assessment of that and make it more automated. Brilliant.
This is a follow-on question, really, but sort of you obviously run huge change programs, in difficult situations, financial recovery, waitlist, pandemics, etc. I guess, and we've spoken a little bit about what it takes to deliver technology within the NHS, but is there anything, top 3 tips for how you deliver technology within these environments?
I mean, number 1 is make sure everyone understands what the benefit's going to be. So why are you doing this? People come to the table with different expectations. People come to the table with different concerns, fears, or even motivations. So I think clinical champions are really important. So make sure that, the clinicians are on board, see the benefit, want to support and develop the change. And if they're not at the table, you've got a problem. Okay, number 1. Number 2, make sure that we're clear with the wider team about what we're doing and why. I think if you don't take everyone with you on the journey, so, you might have a couple of anaesthetists and a surgeon who absolutely can't wait to do this. But what does it mean for the theatre team? Do they, have we spoken to them? Do they understand where we're going? So people management, people expectations, very, very much part of the kind of due diligence that you need to do. Make sure, I think time, going back to what I said about EPR, resource it well. What are you doing? What are you implementing? Who's holding people's hand? Because things will go wrong. They might not go wrong, but they might feel wrong. Yeah. It might be a perception that they haven't gone well. So make sure that part of the implementation is well done. And create a kind of, KPIs is a bit of a loose term, but what's your problem statement and what's your benefits case? Yeah. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be just a few measures that you use to demonstrate change or demonstrate improvement or demonstrate opportunity, and make sure the language is right. You can turn a whole team of people off with the wrong language. You can very, very quickly. Getting them back is harder than losing them in that 10, 15, just clumsy language. Yeah, I'll give you an example. We've talked about this in the NHS for a long time, but we talk in financial recovery about waste. Mm-hmm. Now, waste is like a really horrible word, you could argue it's a waste of resources, but to people that work really hard in the NHS, so you take the theatre team, if you talk about theatre utilisation as waste, that kind of doesn't motivate a lot of people to want to have a conversation about it. So
it's a really good example.
If you talk about opportunity, if you say, we could do 4 more cases if we got that right, instantly clinicians, clinical people are connected to the opportunity. And so we're not talking about performance management. We're not talking about catching people out. We're not talking about performance managing individuals or teams. We're talking about optimization, improvement, and connecting that to patient care. And I think you have everyone in the room completely committed behind you in whatever role they need to play in it. I think that's probably what I would say.
Where have you, sorry, I'm about to put you off because I have to follow up. Where have you experienced that done really well? Like, is there a technology provider or partner that you've worked with who you've gone, they nailed that?
Present company, etc.
I was going to say it's a leading question.
Yeah, no, absolutely isn't.
We'll take robotic surgery, actually, as an example. First robotic surgery program I was involved in was in 2005, the Royal Marsden. It was a great thing, great, amazing thing. I suppose what Intuitive did with Da Vinci and the associated companies was, basically wrapped us in cotton wool and showed us how to implement something. Some of the interventional theatre companies that I can think of, again, they, you buy a product that they design, install, and implement for you, and train your staff. So I suppose industry if you, as industry partners, make this really easy for us, recognise we have quite significant knowledge gaps and deficits, and we won't always think of things that you think we should think of. So make it really easy for us to do. Help us be a kind of critical friend along the pathway. Make it feel like a true partnership rather than I buy a product from you, you give it to me, and 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, I can't find you anywhere. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, or there's issues. So go the extra mile to make sure that implementation is done, but then the optimization phase, the embedding phase is done well. Be visible, be people. And a lot of the time, the NHS adopts technology, particularly in organisations. We tend to end up with the customer helpline once the implementation's gone, and you're like, hang on a minute, this doesn't work. And they're like, yes, that's under the 7-day turnaround as opposed to the 24 hours. And so you think, okay, and what humans will do is walk away from the product.
It just becomes just gathers dust.
I'll go back to paper. Yes. Yeah. No, I get that.
So this is the last question, and we always ask everyone some flavour of this. So you've obviously had quite an extensive career in the NHS, and you've seen a lot of change over that time. But when you look back on it, and also when you look at it now, what does surgery mean to you?
So surgery is about, for me, I mean, I've worked with surgeons from, global leaders to, really hardworking local, sort of district general hospital, high volume surgeons. I think surgery for me is getting the basics right. If the hospital runs well, surgeons can do surgery. If the environment is good physically, so, if we're keeping up with innovation, if we are investing in the infrastructure, we are providing good high levels of surgery, and technology forms part of that. I think the commitment from operational teams to making surgery work. So, the amount of work that goes into booking a patient, making sure they turn up, making sure they're pre-assessed, making sure they're well, all that happens before knife to skin can ever happen. So recognising that surgery is much more than making sure surgeons can turn up in an operating room and operate. And so getting that team highly motivated to be systematically good at every single bit of the journey is really important. I think surgical teams are hugely motivated by innovation and technology. They like that because that's what it is, isn't it? It's moved on hugely. I mean, interoperative MRI, interventional theatres, interventional radiology, all of the move from, over the years from traditionally open surgery. Then we introduce laparoscopic, then we're introducing robotic, then we start introducing minimally invasive, non-surgical interventions, cardiac. All of those areas have been brilliant, but need teams to be constantly thinking about what's next. How do you get the money for it? How do you get the teams to work differently? Do we need to train people differently? Interventional cardiology versus cardiac surgery, it's evolved hugely over the years and moved away from theatre to opportunities for different ways of doing things. So surgery for me is, and it's not just surgery, but surgery for me is an area that needs to be constantly supported, developed. It needs quite significant funding to keep up with innovation. It benefits hugely from partners, industry partners, it could be implantable devices, it could be OR technology, it could be minimally invasive techniques. All of those things are not possible by the NHS just marking its own homework all the time. And some of the most exciting things I've done in my career have been when we've worked collaboratively with industry partners to introduce technology and innovation. And quite often, I'll say this, you'll know what I'm going to say, a kind of bit of a pump priming in terms of adopting technology. It helps us prove the case. It helps us get into the space quickly. I think there are benefits both from an industry perspective, because you get to try your stuff out and we can prove that it works, and we get to try things that are being developed in the marketplace that we wouldn't necessarily have all of the finances for immediately. So partnership is the way forward. Industry partnership is the way forward. And yeah, I think it's very motivating for teams too.
Amazing. Well, Fiona, thank you so much for spending time with us today. We really, really appreciate it. The complexity of your world, it will stay with me for days, I think. But in the meantime, I've been Victoria.
You've been Victoria. I definitely haven't been. I've been Richard.
And if this has landed for you, then do share it with somebody in your network. Until next time, bye for now.
Bye-bye.